Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of our TV6 Digital Desk stream. My name is Molly Birch, and today we have an in-depth interview with artist Ladislav Hanka. He is most well known for designing many of the beer labels for Bell's Brewing Company. TV6's Clint McCleod sat down with him yesterday, and in that conversation, Hanka shares the origin of Bell's Brewery and his role drawing the labels. Let's take a look at the full interview.
Tell me about the beer bottle. How did you originally get involved with the brewing company, and where did the idea come from as featuring John on it?
Oh, well, back in like the early 80s, I was a home brewer, which was not much of a thing back then, but being of Czech parentage, I just kind of grew up in a kind of family which beer is not alcohol, that's just food. Right. Sort of like, Germans or Danes or Dutch or, Poles or something like that, where, you don't quite understand that temperance league attitude of someone's getting trashed when they have a beer with dinner or something. So I ended up making my own beer quite a bit because I didn't much care for most of the American beers. And I think we've all come around to realizing why one wouldn't care for them very much, because you can make much better beer yourself at home, actually, than what the Budweiser Corporation does, or any of the rest of them. So I did that, and Larry Bell was a fellow student at the time, and he was making beer too, and a few of us were, and generally his beer turned out better than everyone else's, curiously enough, and he decided to make a go of it as a business. And so those of us around him that were home brewers tended to tell our friends, and they would invest in his little effort in making beer. And I was the artist he knew, so he asked me to draw some pictures to put on labels. And because I had not been actually in any way spoiled by the various industries that are surrounded by graphic design and branding and labeling and advertising, I was just an artist who saw this as an interesting venue to put artwork out there and make something beautiful of it. It didn't get spoiled. It didn't get turned into just another Budweiser or Miller label. It got turned into something that was actually memorable. And hopefully, memorable things are not necessarily memorable for being awful, but maybe for being interesting as well. And so this happened over the course of several decades, where I was just making, I don't know, maybe I must have submitted over 100 various labels, and I think probably about half of them were actually at some point used. Many of them were like a local small issue of something that happened for a while in a short term, but certainly the Two Hearted Ale was a flagship of the company, and I designed various labels that came and went on Two Hearted Ale, and one of the first ones was actually a portrait of John Volker, and that was, it would have been about 1988 when I did those portraits of him. And I grew up as a fellow who liked to spend vacations in the north of Michigan, where waters are clean and trout abound and all that sort of thing. And it was a wonderful thing. And in southern Canada and wherever I could get, you take time off from college between semesters and go fishing for a few weeks and disappear in the woods and convalesce a little bit from that overexercising of the mind and the intellectual capacities, and look for something a little bit more emotionally stimulating. And for me, that was always going into nature. And it's really a spiritual discipline. And that which other people might find in church, I find among the cathedrals of trees. And
Likewise, how did you originally meet John?
Well, it really started back in, I'd say about 1960, when I was maybe about 8 years old at that point. And I remember on a Christmas, my father got a copy of Trout Madness under the Christmas tree. Well, I snaked that out of there pretty fast, and I was just reading it. I basically memorized that book. I plagiarized the pictures in it and just read it, and it was just fascinating. It was like a Bible for me. This is what life could be. And then the Danny and the Boys and all the other ones and all these game law violators and really cool people and lumberjacks and Indians and whatever else he had up there in the book. And it was really beautiful. It got under my skin in ways that it can only happen, I think, to a child that is so impressionable. And you remember those things, sort of like you remember folk songs. You remember poetry from that age, and later on, your head is so full of things that it's harder to add nuance, I guess, or to remember them or to put them into context. In any case, I thought the world of John, and he continued to be active in interesting ways. And at some point, I decided I'd have to go make the pilgrimage before he died and go up to Frenchman's Pond and meet the guy. Well, I knew people that knew him, and they all told me to just go to the Polly's Rainbow Room Tavern in Ishpeming, and that's probably where you find him. And so I did that. I just kind of on a lark. I was a fairly young man at that point, and I went to Ishpeming and found the tavern. It was one of those places that didn't have a name on the door. You had to know it was there. And you just go into this kind of beat up old, kind of like Lumberman's Tavern or something from back in the day with beat up tables and cigarette burns all over them and that sort of thing, and a pretty skanky looking fellow running the bar. And he kept an eye on me. It was morning, kind of time for the derelicts to go have their beer. And he kept an eye on me. I asked him a little bit about John, and he said he was a non-committal about it. And then John came in for his game of cribbage and coffee or whatever else, maybe a beer and a bump in the morning. I'm not quite sure. And apparently I'd somehow passed the test where I got to stay, and so did he. And I started just drawing him. And that's not very subtle. There's two people in a bar, and one is drawing the other one from across the way. And so after a while, he started asking me about what I was doing. And I told him that, I like to do that. And I'm an artist. And he thought that was amusing that somebody would want to draw him. And then we got talking about logging and fishing and the Denmark Department of Natural Resources and resource management and extraction and all those kinds of things that I'd gone through as a graduate student in zoology at one point. Also done some work with nuclear power plants, doing environmental impact work on them. And so, I had a lot of opinions, and they were pretty wild opinions because I was of an age to have wild opinions. And John had never quite outgrown them either. So we pretty much really hit it off really well, pretty much running down all the mainstays of any economy up in the north where, the jobs were sparse and people were hoping to make money by stealing from the public domain. Or we put it that way sometimes. In any case, we had a good time. And at some point, he asked me, what are you going to do with this stuff? Are you going to sell them or something? And I passed the test. It was apparently because I admitted that as an artist on my own, not too long out of school, I had to make money. I'd sell anything but my mother. And he thought that was like a really good answer. I said, that's right. Al Durant, you sell anything. You turned it all into cash, just like I did growing up as a kid, and before I got my law degree or something. In any case, that went on, and we had a good time. And when I asked him if it'd be okay to put it on a beer bottle label, he thought that was really great. He said, well, those are interesting drawings you've got there. And maybe, yeah. He said, I think the quote that he wrote it down for me, even sent me like a little thank you note, but it was something about like his father having been owned a bar and his grandpappy being a brewer. And so his mug could easily be embalmed on a beer bottle, and he'd like that, so it's nice that I got that permission from him. And so I took him back to the studio, turned him into etchings, into copper plates and that sort of thing, which requires the accoutrements of an artist studio with acids and various implements of destruction and sharp tools and that. And he seemed to like them. He was pretty proud of it. And it was fun. It was kind of funny about it. He was like, he said something about his regal Roman nose and things like that, and how he'd become quite an old man. He doesn't quite see himself as quite that old. And I think that's kind of the norm of the way people look at these things. And so they put it on a beer bottle for a short while, and then it ran into trouble. Apparently, some of the family didn't much care to see their paterfamilias looking like an old alcoholic and stinky fisherman, but he was proud of what he looked like.
When did the beer transition to the iconic photo of the fish now? Did you make that label, and when did that come out?
Oh yeah, I did that too. I did a lot of them. There was before that, the very first label, but way before John, that one was just a couple of fish on it. and I think it's the same one that's on the beer cans right now. But and it was just that sort of feeling like, well, when do you get beer, right? When do you drink beer if you're a normal kind of a person, right? Or a totally ordinary person. Well, you drink it when you go out fishing or you go to the ball game or something, right? There's certain situations in which everybody likes to have a beer. Probably even people who are like, Carrie Nation probably had a beer if she'd ever gone to a football game or gone fishing, right? But
Yeah.
so it was that sort of feeling. Put some fish on the label. Well, that kind of stayed with it, and so we tried John Volker. We tried a few other things. There was a picture of my own father on for a while, who was absolutely enamored of brook trout. He would go anywhere there were little brook trout to fish for in the small streams of Michigan and Ontario. And so I grew up going out and camping and fishing with my father. So honoring him, there was he was among the people that fed the brewery. He was an Upjohn scientist making cancer drugs and things like that in his real professional life. But he was really taken with, as a fermentation biologist who was used to working in hectoliters, and he had become like the absolute perfect person to work for a brewery. I mean, work for it. He was a stockholder is what he was, and got all his friends who were scientists to buy into Larry's company and help build it up with some financial resources and become stockholders in it. But he was also the guy they went to when they had an infection in the yeast culture or something, and it didn't taste quite right. Well, then there was your fermentation biologist that went in and fixed all that up. So anyway, I had a picture of my father on there for a while, and then it just seemed right to have these pictures of Volker, and then it came down to just putting the brook trout on there and staying away from all the personages, which of course not everyone likes or knows. So
Hanka donated 3 portraits of Ishpeming native John Volker to NMU's DeVos Art Museum for permanent display. The museum is currently screening the 42-minute feature film, A Two-Hearted Tale. The movie follows Hanka's journey with Volker and the many beer labels he created. It's screening at 3 p.m. every day this week until Friday. You can also watch it at 7 o'clock on Thursday evening. It's free to attend. Thank you for joining us on this special edition of the TV6 Digital Desk live stream. Have a great rest of your afternoon.